We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. We're taking, or rather Wednesday. It's a short week, isn't it? We're taking your phone calls this morning, 737-7587, talking about the anniversary of September 11th, which will be taking place this weekend with a lot of the memorials. And one aspect of this was, the way the news got out, the coverage and how it happened. And of course, the whole country was watching once we knew what was happening. But initially, when it first occurred, we were all doing our normal everyday thing. And I thought, it was 20 years ago this week that I was on this very set. Sitting next to me was Mark Binda, our programming director here at News Channel 5, who's now joining us by Zoom. Good morning to you, Mark. And yeah, you recall it was, we do this still to this day, where Mark will come on and we'll talk about the new season of television shows. This was going to be the new fall season. And back then, Morning Line went from 7:30 to 9. So it was an hour and a half show. So you and I started, I think, at 7:30, and we were talking about the programming, and then we could hear things going on back in control. Do you recall how it was? We were in the middle of talking, and then we all of a sudden, I think, took a live feed on the Plus of what we were seeing out of New York. Isn't that what had played out?
My recollection is, by the way, was it Tandy or Larry that was your co-host at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as I recall, we went to a break, and then Charlie Orr came rushing into the studio. Charlie Orr was one of our chief engineers at the time, and said, "Hey, guys, there's reports of a plane hitting the World Trade Center." And I think we looked at each other and didn't think much of it at the time. We thought, well, maybe it was like, a crop plane, North by Northwest crop plane that kind of went off kilter. And so we continue with the show, and then I think a few minutes later, Charlie ran back in and said, "Hey guys, this is really big. This is serious. This is not a prop plane." So I think at that point we looked at each other and said, "The show's over. We need to go to network." At that point,
that's exactly right. It was stunning. I mean, because we were, it was okay. So the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. Eastern time. That would have been 7:46 our time. Now, we wouldn't have known about it immediately then, right at that moment, but probably just before 8 or around then, we would have learned. And then at 9 o'clock was when the second plane hit, about 15 minutes later. And I think I remember, you're right, Charlie came in, and then we went to kind of a split screen, I thought, for a moment, and we're showing some of the smoke from one of the buildings of the plane. And at that point, you're right. We didn't know exactly what it was. But then after a while, we realized, especially with the second one, this was a terrorist attack, and they broke away completely, and you and I went down to the newsroom.
Yeah. I think Brian Gumbel might have been the CBS commentator at the time, but it was something. I mean, who knew what was going on? And then the news kept coming in all day long with, the Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But yeah, I if you recall, Nick, the networks basically covered it from Tuesday, whatever it was, 8 o'clock in the morning. We never left the air until Saturday at some point. I think maybe we were supposed to have college football that day, but I think most of the games were canceled. But I think at that point on Saturday, some of the networks went to like some regular programming, but it was solid 9/11 coverage for 5 straight days.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, Mark, as the programming director. And here, when we have local disasters, be it a tornado after the fact or whatever, where we have to break into programming, sometimes bump everything out. And there have been times, like, for instance, Christmas morning here, when we had the explosion on 2nd Avenue, we had to go full wall-to-wall because the story certainly merited it. But can you recall anything, the scope of having had a whole week of pretty much nonstop network news like that over the past 2 decades?
No, I mean, that, I think obviously with the pandemic in March, there were, long periods of time when we had, presidential break-ins and the governor and the mayor. And so there was a lot, but never long sustaining like that for such a long period of time. I don't think anybody was prepared for it. I mean, the networks are kind of making this up as they went. It was such big news. I mean, I will tell you one funny thing. Maybe it's fun. Maybe it's sad funny. But that Big Brother was still going on. As you know, Big Brother is one of the more popular primetime shows. And Big Brother was scheduled for that Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. And I can remember people actually calling in and wondering if we were going to run Big Brother.
That's crazy. You know, by the way, with that, not to go too far afield, but you mentioned it, the whole concept of Big Brother is they're in their own world there. Do you believe that the participants were told while they were in that house what happened? Were they aware of it?
Yeah, they were told, because they even did it when they came back, I guess the following Sunday. And one of the ladies, I don't remember her name, but she actually had somebody die in the Twin Towers.
Okay, I had forgotten that.
Was,
well, and again, with
it really affected everything. If you remember, the NFL had played the night before the Giants in Denver. And then they were scheduled to play. That would have been week 2, and the NFL, they took the whole week off, if you remember. The Emmy Awards were supposed to be that Sunday night, and they were postponed until I think it was October. And then that Sunday, whatever it was, October 13th, something like that, is when we actually, I think, made our first foray into Afghanistan or wherever it was. And they preempted the Emmy Awards again. The Emmy Awards got preempted twice that year.
Well, yeah, because part of the reason was the extended coverage, not only, you know, what was dealing with the recovery and trying to assess all that. We were worried there were going to be other terrorist attacks. You know, I mean, was that the beginning of something? We were all terrified that day, you know, okay, these 2 planes, what else do they have planned? What else is going to happen? Is this the beginning of much, much more? Turned out not to be the case aside those initial 3 aircraft, okay, 4 aircraft. You know, who knows how many were involved initially, but the ones that were involved, you know, Pennsylvania, the Twin Towers, the one that was headed possibly to the Pentagon, you know, so... they were worried about more, I mean, and they stayed on alert for that.
Yeah, I think I know Disney World and some other big places like that shut down for the day. Obviously, who knew what would be targeted? Scary moments. I mean, I'm as you know, I'm from the New York, New Jersey area, and you know, I had family in New York that day. I had a friend from high school died. Was working for Cantor Fitzgerald. Another friend was on the 23rd floor. He made it out. It was something. I mean, something I never want to happen again, obviously.
Oh, it's just awful. And just the memories about that day that I know everyone has. After we got off the air, Mark, I don't know if you came down with me. I think you did. But, I mean, this was back before we renovated our newsroom. And there was the assignment desk right there when you walk into the newsroom to the left. And I went in there, and everyone was gathered around the TVs. The thing that really got me, too, was at that point we knew about 2 planes having struck the towers. And we were hearing reports of these other planes that might be issues. But I remember watching live, and no one knew, when all of a sudden we started noticing one of the towers going down. And to this day, I guess it was the South Tower first, it just... I could not believe my eyes. I mean, it was devastating to begin with, and you're thinking everyone on those floors. But it didn't register to me that the possibility was all this airline fuel was going to do so much damage as it ignited down in the structure of that building that these 2 giant buildings would go down. And we're sitting there watching it actually go down live. And then, of course, my next thought was, there's one. Is the other one going to go down? Do you remember that? I mean, watching it with me, I don't know if you were in with us, but...
I think I'd been back at my office by that point upstairs. But yeah, just shocking. I mean, it was one tragedy after another. Planes get first, as you said, you know, you didn't think the buildings were going to fall down, but they went down, and the images from those days just hard to watch. Hard to watch
even today. Listen, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back for one more quick segment with you if you'll stick around. And among other things, maybe your perspective on, you know, how, you know, you talk about seminal moments and different types of news things and the way it changes coverage ever moving forward. And you think about, say, the O.J. Simpson trial with regard to how that changed the coverage of trials. How, you know, what happened on September 11th and the way the coverage blew out that whole week, which was totally appropriate, may have influenced the way TV news covers these types of events moving forward. So let's take a break. Be back with more with Mark Binda. We can take a few calls as well if you'd like right after this.